Ever since you were a child, you've heard about the moment it all began. That mysterious instant when God said, "Let there be light." But have you ever wondered what language was used in that divine command? What language was it capable of plucking the universe from absolute silence and shaping existence with a simple word? Imagine for a second, before time, before matter, before even angels, there was sound. Or rather, there was a sacred vibration, a celestial language that cannot be written with letters or translated with dictionaries. A language so ancient that it belongs to no civilization, yet it pulses between the lines of Genesis, echoing among the forgotten verses of Scripture. Stay with me until the end, because what you discover now may surprise you, and maybe even confront you. Traditional texts say that God spoke. But if God spoke, to whom did he speak? And how did this speech echo in the void? Was there a primordial language prior to Hebrew, Aramaic, or Greek? A language that not only communicates, but creates? A living word that, when spoken, manifests worlds. Have you ever felt like there's something hidden behind what you've always been taught? That feeling that there's a deeper layer, a mystery not revealed by traditional religions. If so, then you're in the right place. Many believe that the language of creation was composed of frequencies, sacred sounds that vibrated in harmony with divine will. Others argue that this language was spiritual, not human, a type of verbalized consciousness that gave form to the invisible. We're not just talking about words, we're talking about the essence of the word. It's the language that shaped the heavens, the earth, and everything in between. And the most impressive thing, fragments of this language are still with us, in sacred names, in ancient hymns, in forbidden texts that have been banned from pulpits for centuries. You've heard it. But maybe you didn't realize it. What if I told you that this language is still active, and that some people can still hear it? In the next moment, we'll dive deeper into this revelation. Because the heavenly language may be much closer than you think, and that some can still hear it. Perhaps you felt something yourself, a vibration, a shiver, a word that came out of nowhere and seemed to carry more than just sound. Have you ever experienced this? That strange yet familiar feeling that something invisible is trying to communicate with you. If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below with what resonated with you so far. What does this idea of celestial language evoke in you? Your comment may seem small, but it's through it that this conversation comes to life, that we create together a community of seekers, of souls who sense something beyond the veil. And if you haven't liked this video yet, do so now. This simple gesture helps this content reach more people who, like you, also sense there's something hidden beyond words. Every like, every comment, every subscription is like a spark that reignites this spiritual calling. This journey for answers that can't be found in ordinary books. If you feel like continuing to delve into these mysteries, subscribe to the channel now. This shows that you're ready to go deeper, that you, like so many others just arriving here, want to be part of something bigger. And believe me, what comes next will take you even further in this revelation, because understanding the heavenly language is just the beginning. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. And perhaps, more than ever, it's time to open space for a question that many avoid, but that can completely change the way you see existence. If God spoke to create the universe, what language did he use? This question seems simple, but it carries a chasm, because when we think of language, we automatically imagine words, letters, and articulated sounds. But what if the language God used in the beginning had nothing to do with this? What if it were a pure expression of creative consciousness, a vibrational code that exists beyond what our ears can perceive? Before Hebrew, before Greek, before Aramaic, before any writing, before any religion, before even the idea of communication, there was a sound, a frequency, a silent order that tore through nothingness and began to weave time, matter, and life. The Kabbalistic tradition calls this the wordless voice, a sacred language that doesn't need to be heard with the ears, but felt with the spirit. Some ancient texts speak of the primordial sound. The sound of the Ein Sof, which is not a noise hit, is a state, a point of origin where word, intention, and creation are one. This may seem abstract, but think about it. Everything that exists vibrates. Every atom, every particle, everything is in motion. And vibration is sound. The entire universe is sound. So perhaps the true language of creation was not a phrase, but a frequency, an energetic signature, a divine code. When the text says, "And God said, let there be light," did he speak, or did he emanate? An impulse of coded, structured light that, as it passed through the void, began to transform into reality. Perhaps this is why, in many ancient cultures, light is always associated with knowledge, hidden truth, and revelation. The truth is that, behind the words that have reached us, there are layers and layers of meaning that have been silenced over time. And perhaps this silence is intentional, because there are mysteries that are only revealed to those who truly seek, not with their eyes, but with their intention. Have you ever felt that certain words touch you differently? That there are phrases that not only inform you, but transform you, as if they carry something more? This is no coincidence. This is a remnant of the original language. Fragments of the initial vibration still circulate among USN symbols in sacred sounds, in experiences that send shivers down your spine for no logical reason. And this is precisely what begins to shape the journey of those who awaken. A journey that is not about memorizing doctrines, but about activating forgotten memories. The celestial language, deep down, may be within us, dormant, waiting for the exact frequency to manifest. Not as external knowledge, but as internal recognition. Do you notice the difference? It's not about learning something new. It's about remembering what was there from the beginning. So tell me, does this make sense to you? Comment here. I'm on this journey too, because the next revelation is already coming to light. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, and perhaps invite you to look at a phrase you've heard hundreds of times with new eyes. And God said, "Let there be light." It's right at the beginning of Genesis. It's in sermons, children's books, and movies. This phrase is like a universal password that points to the beginning of everything. But have we ever asked ourselves what was really said? Could this well-known phrase hide a key that was given to us, but forgotten? Because if creation began with a word, that word can't be just any word. It carries weight, power, and origin. And everything that has an origin has a story, even if that story is hidden behind the scenes of tradition. The Bible has been translated and retranslated over the centuries. The "and God said" we read today is just the surface of something that, in the original text, carries a completely different energy. In ancient Hebrew, each letter has a value, a vibration, a code. Nothing there is random. And this is where the transformation of our mindset begins. Because when we look at this phrase with spiritual eyes, it ceases to be information and becomes an invitation. An invitation to investigate, to break the pattern of superficial reading and delve into the hidden truth that lies behind sacred language. It's not about doubting Scripture. It's about going beyond what has been permitted to be seen for centuries. What did God say? What was the exact sound that emerged from the invisible and shattered the eternal silence? Was it visible light? Or a light only the eyes of the soul can perceive? Could this "let there be light" have been some kind of vibrational command? A multi-dimensional decree that triggered layers of reality that science cannot yet measure. Think about it. Modern science already recognizes that light is more than brightness. It's energy, it's frequency, it's particle and wave. What the ancients knew and what we now call mysticism or allegory may just be a different way of naming what we're still beginning to understand. Perhaps the divine word is a sound that not only describes ... but activates a kind of spiritual technology based on frequency, consciousness, and intention. And this takes us to another dimension of creation. Because if God said, then the word is older than time. Speech precedes the calendar. Sound comes before the clock. And perhaps that's why the Gospel of John begins with, "In the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God, and the Word was God." What does this mean in practice? That God's language is not separate from Him. What He says is what He is. There is no difference between the Creator and what He communicates. He doesn't just speak. He manifests Himself in the form of words. And that changes everything. Because if this language is within us if dormant, then part of that power also pulses within creation. Even within you, how many times have you felt something calling you, but couldn't explain it? A phrase, an image, a verse, something seemingly ordinary. But that stirred something you didn't even know existed. It's as if the primordial language still vibrates in the details, waiting for someone with an awakened spirit to recognize it. And this is where things begin to make more sense. Creation was not an isolated event. It was an echo, a process, a continuous unfolding of the divine language still in action. The light that was called still shines, not because it is lit, but because it continues to respond to the original command. Let there be light wasn't just a phrase. It was an activation, a path opening, an alignment between the invisible and the visible, between the intangible and what you can touch. And this revelation has a direct impact on your journey. Because understanding this isn't just spiritual curiosity, it's a decision to look at the world with a new awareness. You begin to realize that everything communicates, that every symbol, every word, every vibration has a code, a purpose, a pattern. And that perhaps part of your purpose here is to learn to decode these signals not as someone who studies, but as someone who remembers. Because the divine language may never have been lost, just silenced. Now tell me, does this make sense to you? Comment, "This makes sense to me." I want to know who is following this journey with the right eyes and ears, because what this language reveals goes even further. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because if you're here so far, it's because something within you has already begun to move. And this movement is no accident. There's a hidden truth, a blind spot of traditional spirituality that for centuries has been ignored, stifled, perhaps even purposefully silenced. The sound of creation wasn't just a word. It was a consciousness, a living emission of divine intention that shapes, sustains, and transforms reality. When we say that God spoke, the popular imagination creates the scene of an imposing voice breaking the silence. But what if that wasn't exactly the case? If, in place of an articulate voice, there was a conscious vibration, a primordial code that needed no words to communicate, because it was, in itself, truth itself. Imagine a sound that is heard not with the ears, but with the spirit. A sound that doesn't need to be understood, because it is felt. This is the essence of celestial language. It doesn't inform, it activates. It doesn't explain, it reveals. And what it reveals is not just something external, but something internal, something that is already within you, waiting for the right frequency to awaken. Think about music. How certain notes evoke emotions you can't explain. How an ancient chant, even without translation, can move you or generate a peace that no rational explanation can justify. This is more than art. It's an ancient technology. And perhaps the celestial language is encoded just like that in vibrations that resonate with the soul, not the mind. That's why certain words seem to carry something. It's not about what they mean. It's about what they release. Like keys, and each one opens a different door within you. Creation wasn't just an external spectacle. It was also an internal activation. The same sound that formed the galaxies can be the sound that rekindles your consciousness today. This is a journey of profound impact because it forces us to rethink everything we think about communication, about truth, about what it truly means to hear God's voice. Perhaps you're expecting a phrase, when in fact, what will come will be a state, a presence, a vibration that permeates what is visible and reverberates in decisions, intuition, and encounters. This isn't some mystical idea disconnected from reality. In quantum physics, frequency is already being discussed as the basis of existence. Everything vibrates, everything pulsates, and if everything pulsates, then everything is emitting some kind of message. Matter is a message. Light is a message. Time is a message. The entire universe is constantly emitting signals. The question is, who's listening? Now consider the following scene. The Spirit hovered over the waters. This is described at the very beginning of creation. But how did it hover? In silence or in resonance? Some mystical scholars believe that the Spirit there emitted sounds that structured the chaos, vibrations that gave form to the formless. And these vibrations would be the origin of celestial language, not random sounds, but conscious codes, sound truths. This completely transforms our view of spirituality, because it shows that creation was not something mechanical, but relational. God's sound was not a shout into the void. It was a touch in the invisible, an activation of frequencies that, to this day, continue to echo between the lines of reality. And when someone, like you, begins to awaken, these echoes become more perceptible. Celestial language predates human speech. It is alive. It responds to intention. And it is transmitted by everything that carries divine essence. Therefore, there are places that speak, music that heals, words that burn. Not because they have ordinary meaning, but because they carry an original frequency. The vibration of origin. Have you ever noticed how certain decisions seem to be guided by something that wasn't logical, but inevitable? As if a part of you heard something silent and simply knew what to do. This is primordial language in action, not an external instruction, but an internal synchronicity between the sound of creation and your spirit. And this is precisely where everything begins to align. Because the question is no longer, what did God say, but what are you hearing now? The sound of creation continues, but it only responds to awakened consciousness. It's not noise, it's direction. It's presence. It's vibration with purpose. Write it down. I hear what is not said. This reveals a lot more about you than it seems. And that's just the beginning of the revelation. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because, as unbelievable as it may seem, there are ancient accounts that point to a truth that was deliberately marginalized from official history. Texts forgotten, silenced, censored over the centuries, but which survive as fragments of a greater revelation. Fragments that, when assembled, begin to paint a picture entirely different from what we've been taught. There was indeed a language before man, a language spoken by angels, and, perhaps, even by Adam. Before the fall, the Book of Enoch is one of these hidden keys. Hidden for centuries, considered apocryphal, excluded from the official canons. It narrates in rich detail encounters between Enoch and the so-called Watchers, celestial beings who revealed secrets to mankind. But what almost no one realizes is that, for there to be revelation, there must be language. Enoch understood what these beings were saying. He wrote it down. He translated it. This leads us to the inevitable question: what language was this? The text isn't grammatically clear. But scholars of Jewish mysticism point out that Enoch was initiated into a spiritual language predating Hebrew, a language not learned but revealed, a language spoken not with the mouth but with the being, a type of direct communication between consciousness and truth, and not coincidentally. Enoch himself was taken to heaven without experiencing death precisely for mastering this divine code. The Book of Jubilees also mentions something similar. There, Adam is described as someone who received words directly from the Creator, not just instructions, but knowledge, the power to name things. This is profound, because naming within the biblical tradition is not just giving a label. It is activating the spiritual sense of that entity. It is recognizing its essence. To do this, Adam would need a language compatible with the pre-fall state that is, a pure language, without corruption, without duality. A heavenly language, and if this language was understood by Adam before the fall, what happened to it afterward? Was it forgotten or hidden? Does it still pulse between the lines of the Psalms, in the sacred names, in the symbols of the prophets? This is where the rack opens wide, because everything indicates that this language never ceased to exist, was simply removed from reach, divided, encrypted, hidden among common words. And throughout history, very few have had access to fragments of it, not as a privilege, but as a mission. Men and women who carried this sound within themselves like an ancestral memory. It wasn't about translating, but about recognizing. Kabbalah speaks of this when it discusses the 70 names of God. Each name, a frequency. Each frequency, an aspect of creation. A tone, an energy, a vibration that touches the soul differently. These names are not nicknames or titles. They are conscious sounds, echoes of the original language. And when someone pronounces them truthfully, something happens, something opens, something aligns. This is the point in the journey where we realize we're dealing with more than theology or history. We're dealing with a matrix, a spiritual linguistic system that acts as a cog between heaven and earth, between the invisible and the visible. And perhaps this is why so many of these texts have been erased from the main narrative. Because whoever understands this language understands the very mechanism of creation. You begin to notice a pattern. Enoch, Adam, Moses. Figures who not only heard God, but also spoke to him. They had access to a channel most have lost. And this channel wasn't just mystical, it was sonic, vibrational, linguistic in the purest sense of the word. They didn't just pray with words, they spoke in living codes. And we're not talking about strange tongues or glossolalia as seen in religious rituals. We're talking about a communication that goes beyond sound, form, and vocabulary. We're talking about a spiritual memory that, when activated, reconnects the soul to its point of origin, to the sound that said, "Let there be." Write it down. I want to remember this language. Because recognizing this calling is the first step in deciphering what comes next. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because everything we've seen so far leads us to one of the most sacred, feared, and misunderstood expressions in the entire spiritual history of humanity, the Tetragrammaton, 4 letters that carry a power that transcends phonetics, grammar, sound. YHWH, the so-called unpronounceable name of God. But what does it mean to say that something cannot be pronounced? Is it a limitation or a protection? For centuries, this name was guarded with utmost care. It was written, but not spoken, known, but not released. Some say that pronouncing it without due reverence caused immediate death. Others claim it could only be chanted once a year by a single priest within the Holy of Holies, shrouded in smoke and awe. But what if this prohibition concealed a greater secret? What if this name was not a word, but a vibrational code? YHWH is not an ordinary word. It has no vowels. It has no defined sound. It's like a divine breath. A breath. A flow of energy that can only be captured, not spoken. And this tells us a lot about sacred language. Because while human language seeks to explain, divine language seeks to manifest. It doesn't describe, it creates. Some say that the true name of God cannot be heard, but rather perceived. It is like a silent note that resonates in the spirit, something that activates layers of the soul that the mind cannot reach. A sound that, instead of filling the air, permeates existence. This is why mystics from different traditions affirm the name of God is not in sound. It is in vibration. And only those who reach a certain state of consciousness can even approach it. This completely changes the way we view the sacred, because it shows us that divinity cannot be reduced to letters or titles. God is not a name. He is a presence. And what we call the tetragrammaton is perhaps just the trace of this presence trying to be captured in human language. It's like trying to package infinity in 4 letters, and herein lies the real impact. By trying to pronounce the name, we distance ourselves from the experience. Because the name, after all, is not meant to be spoken. It's meant to be felt. Vibrations like these don't need to be vocalized. They need to be recognized. That's why, in some currents of Kabbalah, the name is meditated upon, not spoken. It is visualized, breathed, intuited, like a cosmic seal that activates through resonance, not effort. Now think about this within your own journey. How many times have you sought answers in words, when, in truth, all you needed was to be silent and feel? God's name may have been whispering within you for years, but perhaps the noise of the world has drowned out the sound. Perhaps this is why silence always precedes revelation. Because only in silence can vibration be perceived. And when you understand that the sacred is not limited to words, something within you changes. A key turns. Because you realize that divine communication doesn't depend on voice or ears. It depends on alignment, on presence, on intention. This is where the symbolism of the tetragrammaton comes alive, not as something external to you, but as a mirror. The unpronounceable name is the reflection of who we are when we silence all that is noise and leave only that which vibrates truth. Write it down. I feel what is not said. Because when this vibration awakens, no words are needed anymore. And what comes after that is revelation. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because when we begin to understand that God's name is not a sound, but a vibration, not a word, but a presence, then the question ceases to be, how do you speak it? And becomes, how do you access it? And it is at this point in the journey that we find some of the most intriguing evidence. Hidden behind the scenes of occult and spiritual traditions, often treated as taboo or heresy, but which brings revelations that can no longer be ignored. Kabbalah, for example, teaches that the universe was created through letters, but not just any letters. They are the 22 signs of the ancient Hebrew alphabet, each with its own vibration, energy, and specific purpose. For the Kabbalist, these letters are not just graphic symbols, they are living forces, channels of manifestation. Each carries a sacred sound, an echo of the original language that shaped the cosmos. And the most surprising thing is that these letters were not created by man. They were perceived, revealed, as if they had always been there, waiting for someone sensitive enough to grasp them. And this leads us to one of the most provocative ideas of all. Divine language is not learned, 'tis remembered. This completely changes the paradigm, because we're not talking about acquiring knowledge, but about awakening something that's already within us. A dormant memory buried under layers of noise, fear, distractions, and dogma. When you begin to access this vibration, you don't feel like you're hearing something new. You feel like you're coming home. In many ancient spiritual traditions, name wasn't just a way of addressing someone. It was the very essence of that entity. To know something's name was to gain access to what it truly is. Name and identity were one. And so, knowing God's true name was considered the greatest of spiritual secrets, not because it conferred power in the egoic sense, but because it restored the original connection between creator and creature. In mystery schools, there were rituals where certain sounds, intoned with precision, produced altered states of consciousness, not because there was magic involved, but because these vibrations, when aligned with the right intention, unlocked internal codes. It's as if each of us were an instrument that, when struck with the right note, resonates with truth. And here comes a crucial point. This language we are exploring, this language of creation, is not restricted to ancient texts or secret ceremonies. It is present in the details, in the sound of a sacred name, in the structure of a psalm, in the rhythm of a prayer offered with an awakened heart. It is in the silence between the words and the dreams you've forgotten, in the decisions you've made without knowing why. But that sets you on the right path. There's something that can only be understood by living it. And that's the essence of divine language. It's not theoretical, it's experiential. It invades, transforms, disrupts patterns, forces you to look at life with different eyes. And that's why it's frightening, because it reveals, and revelation, before being light, is an abyss. It's the moment you realize how much you've been asleep, and how much you can awaken. This is why so many resist. Because to remember this language, you have to unlearn the noise. You have to step out of the automatic, questioned certainties. Silence your ego and allow yourself to feel something that doesn't fit within logic. This is the turning point, where the journey ceases to be a search and becomes a return. A return to the place where sound became flesh, where the word lived among us not as a religious figure, but as the living sound of origin within every awakened being. Do you feel it? Comment here. I'm going back to the origin. Because this return is more than a path. It is the memory of who you always were. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because there's a question that insists on refusing to be silenced even after everything we've explored so far. What if creation still echoes? What if that original sound, that pure, conscious, living vibration is still repeating itself, like an eternal whisper spanning the centuries? Can some still hear it? Have you heard it, even without understanding it? Sometimes it's not a word, not even a voice. It's a strange feeling that something invisible is trying to reveal itself. Like a call that comes from within, but wasn't generated by you. Have you ever experienced this? Those moments when everything goes silent inside, even with the world screaming outside, and something touches you, formless, illogical, but with a force that's impossible to deny. Maybe this is the language of creation, trying to remind you of something, and that changes everything. Because the idea that creation was a distant event, frozen in time, begins to crumble. What emerges is the revelation that it is still happening, that the word is still being spoken, that the sound still reverberates, not in words, but in vibrations that shape reality, guide paths, and awaken consciousness. This echo isn't literal, it's existential. It manifests in small decisions, in unlikely encounters, in coincidences that you feel aren't coincidences, in everything that carries a kind of strange beauty, a silence full of meaning. And the more you align with this, the more you begin to realize that there is something or someone guiding you through frequencies that don't come from the visible world. Have you ever felt this? That intuition that has no explanation but later proves to be accurate. That word you heard at just the right moment, as if it had been spoken just for you. That song, that name, that symbol, that seemed to trigger a memory you didn't even know you had. These are the traces, the fragments, the sound particles of the origin, still active. And the most profound thing? Perhaps it's not a matter of listening, but of remembering. Perhaps the divine language isn't being spoken out there. Perhaps it's vibrating within, just waiting for the right moment to emerge. And that moment is always the same when you decide to listen with your spirit and no longer with fear. This is why so much begins to reorganize itself when we fall silent. Because in this silence, the verb returns. Not the verb as a word, but as consciousness, as a sounding light, as access to what has always been and what is still being. And this is the truth that the ancients knew and that many today are beginning to remember. Creation is not past, 'tis presence. It is now, and if it still echoes. What is being said at this very moment? Is the sound that started it all still calling you? Comment here. I hear the echo of the origin. Because when that sound finds space, it transforms. And what comes next changes everything. If you've made it this far, it's because something in this content spoke directly to you, and that says a lot. It means you're ready to access layers few dare explore. And that's precisely the purpose of this channel, to open paths where there was previously silence. If this message made sense to you, if at any point you felt that different vibe, leave it in the comments. I'm with you until the end. Because every word you write here helps keep this journey alive and shows that the truth, even when hidden, still finds those who truly desire it. If enjoying this video felt natural to you, please leave a like. It's a simple yet powerful way to show that this connection touched you and that it's worth continuing to open this sacred space together. And if you want to keep receiving content like this, subscribe to the channel. Not as someone who joins any channel, but as someone who decides to continue a journey of revelation, transformation, and spiritual remembrance. There's a video here on the side that complements this subject. Click and continue with me there. Because this language that has just started to awaken still has a lot to reveal.